Yeah, maybe you can introduce himself.
All right. All right, everybody. Yeah, so I've known TJ Fraser here for about 5 years. So I started this. We're in his law firm offices, also his office building that he's a co-owner of, which is pretty cool. I started off. Many of you guys know, or actually some of you know, that I'm a software developer. And TJ started a startup 5 years ago. He built a piece of software, a piece of bespoke software for his law firm, and he was showing it to other lawyers at other law firms, and everybody was like, "Dude, you've got a really cool thing on your hands. Like, why don't you sell this thing?" And he was like, "Well, shoot, maybe I should." And back in 2016, he hired me on as the first employee of a company called Zencase, and he's pretty much the managing partner of his law firm, which is Evanson Fraser and Lunsford here in Jacksonville, Florida. But he's also the CEO of Zencase, which is a legal practice management software that helps law firms manage their cases, invoice their clients, track knowledge, generate documents quickly. So I know all this stuff because I was here for 4 years, and so
And we miss you. We
yeah.
love you. You know, got a lot of love for Josh.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just going to be very frank. TJ's straight up a mover and shaker in this town, Jacksonville, Florida. He's got a bunch of notable achievements on his profile, which I linked in the chat a few minutes ago, and I'm really excited to do this AMA because, like, I mean, I've listened to him because I was working in a law firm. I've listened to him like grill dudes in like corporate litigation cases, like where there's like millions of dollars on the line, and he was doing a deposition where he was taking a guy's testimony, and he was just like, "You did this, you stole all this business." Like, I remember that. Like,
It was most of it's not all that exciting.
no, dude, that was awesome. It was straight up Law and Order. Like, it was straight out of the movies. It was awesome. So, with that being said, yeah, TJ, why don't you walk us through your background as an attorney and an investment banker?
Okay. Well, hello there to the digital world. My name's TJ Fraser, and lucky enough to have gotten to know Josh Pleak, but
I'm Nils. I'm Nils on the server.
Josh, okay, whatever. I'm sorry. Uh, but so let me kind of take you through a little bit of my background. So like a lot of people, I kind of started off thinking that I knew what I wanted to do in life. So I thought that I wanted to be a corporate attorney and do transactions and do deals. So went to law school, went and worked for a big law firm, which had some really, really awesome clients. And I started doing deals and transactions, and a lot of it was tax work, and a lot of it was finance, and it was fun. But after doing that for a year, I kind of looked at myself in the mirror, and I'm like, I feel like I should be more like a real lawyer, like go to court and stuff. And so I still stayed as a corporate lawyer and stayed part of the corporate group and started doing litigation and did that and really had a pretty neat practice area because one of the niches that I was lucky enough to start in was doing big band breakup litigation. So represented like Matchbox 20 whenever their former manager sued them, and represented
Goodness.
Limp Bizkit whenever they
Are you serious?
they fired their drummer, and it was all over stuff that is not doesn't sound as cool or fun, but like the drummer of Limp Bizkit was claiming that he was a co-writer in certain songs, so he said that he got royalties and stuff like that, which was fun and cool. But then eventually I just kind of rolling ahead got my entrepreneurial itch, and so decided that I wanted to leave the practice of law after being at a big firm for 3 years, and they just sold a big bank down here in the southeast called Barnett Bank, and the management team there got a very large extraordinary bonus because it was a very large transaction, and then they funded me to try and take a public company private, which was pretty cool, and I was like 27 or 28 at the time. So I was like, I can't believe that they did it, candidly, because I mean, it was like, you never get what you don't ask for in life. Remember that. If you don't remember anything else from today, remember, you never get what you don't ask for. And sometimes you get something that you shouldn't. And that was a good example. And so I did that and did a lot of entrepreneurial ventures with that group for several years. Then started my own law firm with one of my old partners at my old law firm. And then after a couple of years, we always decided that we wanted to be lawyers that also did deals. So we eventually started a separate company called Lionsbridge Capital, which also has an investment banking side and an asset management side. And we did that so that we could bring in other people that we thought were really talented to work together to help to buy companies, sell companies, raise capital, do transactions. And then really it was from the need of being both a lawyer and doing a lot of investment banking transactions that ended up building the need for this company called ZenCase, which is where I spend most of my time now. And that's a technology that's really built to create, to help law firms and lawyers be a lot more efficient in really the practice of law, closing transactions, capturing knowledge, sharing knowledge, analyzing their data. But the whole of all of that in ZenCase is really meant to help people to get from point A to point B and the most efficient straight line possible.
All right. Well, so clearly well versed, well educated, and have crazy, super awesome experience. So
I like this. Whenever we were working together, when am I paying you for this? This is great.
Well, so let's just start from the beginning. So you've had all this negotiation, high stakes negotiation experience. I do want to get into AMA questions as soon as possible, but what would you say is general advice? So the average server age is probably anywhere from 16 to 25 years old. So if that person is asking you, what general advice would you have for high stakes negotiations? Because everybody in this world is going to be in a high stakes negotiation at some point in their lives. What would be your general advice?
Well, I think that the most important thing is to know your environment and do your homework. Okay, so there's a couple of really, really great negotiation books that have been written. One of them that I think is the best is a book called Getting to Yes, and that's the offspring of the Harvard Negotiation Project, and it's got a very, very good paradigm of thinking. But I would say it all depends. It's all contextual, right? So remember that negotiating ultimately comes down to people. I don't care if you're doing a deal that's $1 million or $100 million or $1 billion, or as I find some of my most high stakes negotiation with your wife, right? So, so it's very important to understand, more than anything else, you have to understand the desires, the fears, the motivations, the drivers, the personality type of those people that you're dealing with. Because remember that people are people, and they are listening to the world based upon their own human experience, what they want, what they're afraid of, what motivates them. And so more than anything else, if I was going to say one thing that relates to negotiating more than anything else, that is, you have to remember that you are dealing with people, and you have to talk to what they want to listen to.
Right. So, DiCaprio, I see that there's a cap on the channel. There's 25 out of 25 people in the channel. I don't know if we can lift the cap in any way. Is that possible?
So the cap is there because you guys are using your webcam, and Discord automatically cap at 25.
Okay, so if we turn it off, will it open it up?
It's really up to you guys.
I mean,
well,
it'll open it up, but then people won't be able to see you on video, but they can hear you.
Well, you know what? I'm probably not that good to look at anyway, so I'm going to turn off video. So there we go.
Boom. Oh, snap. Somebody was waiting and just clicking because it went to 26 immediately. All right. Well, that's excellent general advice. I love it, TJ. Do you have an OnlyFans?
What does that mean?
That's an online thing in the pandemic that took off. Everybody's laughing. You don't know what OnlyFans is.
I'm sorry. Guys, you got to keep in mind, I'm an old man here. Oh my gosh, sorry guys.
So it's a site where people go on there and you can subscribe and get dirty pictures and stuff like that.
Oh, well then obviously I don't have that. And if I did have it, I would say that I don't have that. So, yeah.
Okay, let's start with the pinned messages. Do I start at the bottom or do I start at the top, guys?
It's up to you. The top, if you scroll to the
Those
top, that's where the oldest ones are, the first ones.
Okay. All right, so someone's asking this as in terms of your investment banking background. What happens when a company goes bankrupt?
So when a company goes bankrupt, if it actually files for bankruptcy protection, then basically what happens is a trustee is appointed that will then take anything that's valuable in the company or its assets and sell the assets, and then they're going to pay the creditors based upon their priority, starting with secured creditors first. And so basically, whenever a company goes bankrupt, if it's a liquidation, then they're going to take all of the assets, sell the assets for the highest and best value, whatever they can get, and then they're going to take that money and then they're going to pay that to the creditors, starting with secured creditors.
Okay.
And other.
What's a secured creditor versus a non-secured creditor?
So a secured creditor is somebody that has a lien on their assets. And also there's other priority creditors, like employees might get the first money out, and then after employees, of course, the lawyers get the next money out. Then after the lawyers, then the secured creditors based upon who has the highest security interest in the collateral of the company.
Okay. Dang, that's an awesome answer. Like that was like straight out of a textbook. I'm going to skip a few of these banking questions because I really want to focus on the negotiation aspect. This is a good question. What advice would you give to someone who wants to pass a job interview?
So that's actually a really good question. The first thing is really know who it is that you're going to be interviewing with and know a lot about the company. And also remember that a job interview is just as much as it is an opportunity for you to show like who you are. The best way to show your intelligence is not by making statements, but by asking insightful questions. So if you were to go into a job interview and say to yourself, I am not going to tell anybody anything, but rather I'm going to ask them questions, about the company, about their product, about the market, about how they currently do the job, about things that they could do better. And I'm going to show, so you can really learn a lot more about somebody, not by necessarily listening to the statements that they make, by listening to the questions they ask. And so I think that far too little of a time, whenever I've been the interviewer, that I have heard somebody come back and ask insightful questions. And the times that I have had people ask insightful questions, those have always been the people that have stood out to me.
Awesome. As a salesperson, what would be the most effective way to reach out to you and make a pitch? Like, say someone's selling to you, how would they convince you with your experience? I'm sure being sold lots of things for hundreds of thousands and tens of thousands of dollars.
So that's actually an interesting question. I would start with, if it's something that I'm looking for, right? Get me at the right place at the right time whenever I have a need. If it's something that's a complete cold call, there is no better way to get in the door than by a referral, right? So I'm a big fan of utilizing sales networks, or really you would call it kind of network marketing, for lack of a better term, but where you are going from one customer success to another, or going from one relationship to another, because somebody that tells me that they've been referred to me from somebody that I know and trust, I'm going to give them some time. It might be 5 minutes, it might be 10 minutes, it might be an hour. But if it's somebody that's been referred in, I'm going to give them time. If it's somebody that's a cold call, I'm probably, just because my time's limited, not going to give them the time. So I would say, that's a big differentiator. And then a second thing is if somebody does something that's really truly unique or intriguing, then I have gotten cold emails, or as a matter of fact, last week I had somebody call and they just started off, and their personality was so good. They said, hey, I am a cold caller, but I'm going to tell you something in the next 10 seconds that I think could change your life if you listen to me. And I was like, well, I don't know how I say no to that, right? And, it turned out that they were just trying to sell any old product. But at the end of the call, I said, listen, if you ever are looking for a job, give me a call, because we could use you over at Zencase.
That's great. So this is an awesome question for you specifically, TJ, since I know you. How do you manage your work-life balance?
Terribly. I work, and by the way, I will say this for the record. The term work-life balance, to me, I'm a work hard, play hard person, right? I have wonderful children, and I'm really, really lucky to be able to spend great quality time with them as well. I have an amazing wife. and I'm lucky to get to spend a lot of time with her. But the reality is this, okay, work-life balance to me, and Josh has been around me long enough to know, some nights I may work till midnight. Some days I may take off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. To me, balance does not mean every day getting home at 5, right? To me, balance means making sure that you're setting aside quality time for the people that matter in your life, you know, your family, your friends, your significant other, and but it may be, especially whenever you're working to grow a business or create a new technology or doing something that's significant, it may not be as linear as the old 9 to 5 job. Nowadays, I think it might be, you know, taking off a couple extra days to go on a long weekend, and then you work crazy, and then you take, you know, so. But I am definitely not a good example of work-life balance because goodness knows I feel like I work a lot.
Yeah, so actually about a month ago, I was having kind of a rough night. It was a Tuesday night, and I drove around the city. It was like 8 p.m. and I was kind of nearing TJ's office, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna drive into the office park and see if TJ's there. And I drove around, and it was like 8. Actually, it was 9 o'clock. It was 9 o'clock, and TJ was at the office. So like just want to mention, there's a price to success.
Yeah, that's true. And I will say, you know, I'm very lucky because I take mentorship very seriously. I'm lucky in that I have a mentor that built a very, very large company, and we talk a lot about work-life balance. And, you know, whenever, you know, he was building his company, you know, he's very quick to say that for years of his life, you know, he would have to travel several days a week, and there is a sacrifice to pay for that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not, the grass is not always greener on the other side.
Right. So if you're hiring someone, what would you look for on a resume?
So I would say what I would really look for is there's a fundamental quality of, and Josh has heard me give this speech a million times. Neil, yeah, whatever. I'm sorry, whatever your pseudonym is. Call you. But it's this concept of looking for people that are objective oriented. So in my view of the world, I don't want to have to work with somebody that I ever have to tell them what to do. I would much rather work with people that we can talk about what the objective is, and that they will tell me how they're going to meet the objective, and also that they're going to tell me sometimes what I think is the objective is not the smartest objective. So I want to work with people that are going to figure out how to get from point A to point B themselves without me having to give them any direction, and that they're going to keep me updated of how they're going to get there, that they're going to give me milestones that they're going to meet along the way to judge success or failure, and that they're going to be transparent. And so whenever I look at a resume, I look to see the attributes and the history, right? Because I think history repeats itself. Is this person going to be objective oriented based upon their experiences? Mm-hmm. And I also look for people that are competitive, right? Because, you know, it's funny, like you know, sometimes, you know, kids come home with these participation trophies. Well, that's not the real world, right? The real world, right, there's winners and losers. And I want to know people that can fight to be a winner and that aren't afraid to lose. And you know, that's another big attribute. You don't need to win every time, but if whenever you don't win, you learn from it, or you practice to get better, and you can get up and you can go to the next round, that's another thing that I want to see. So in terms of resume, I look for things that will show me that the person has an objective-oriented nature, that they want to win, that they're competitive, and also I want to see that somebody follows their passions, right? I don't care if you love butterflies, chess, surfing, or whatever, but, you know, like if I were to see on your resume, hey, I took off a year to travel around the world to find the best wave, I love it. That's what I want to see. Somebody that is willing to follow their passions.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was a very in-depth answer off the cuff, which is, I think that's really cool. What are the common mistakes that you've seen people do when they've tried to sell you a product? So I kind of want to expand that a little bit. What is the most common mistake you've seen, and like I'm going to be very frank here, taken advantage of in a high-stakes negotiation?
So in negotiation, So let's kind of bring this paradigm back to what a negotiation actually is.
Okay.
Because a lot of people think that a negotiation is what happens whenever two people walk into the room and say, let's make a decision, right? And let's have an agreement, right? Because an agreement is something that you and I have to agree on certain things, right? So if a negotiation is the meeting itself, or is negotiation the broader thing that happens before the meeting, after the meeting, during the meeting? Because whenever I think of negotiation, you really have to start off with charting out a couple of key things, right? The first thing is you have to define what success or failure is. So if you're talking high stakes negotiation, again, I've been lucky to work with people that are 100 times smarter than I am, and have had some really interesting experiences. And working with them as their kind of lead person, as their lawyer, it's a lot of work, right? So a couple of things. Okay, number one is you need to be able to define success and failure for yourself, and you also need to know all the shades of gray in between. You also need to know every variable that will come into play for your negotiation. And if it's a high stakes negotiation, you need to have created a model, typically a financial model or a spreadsheet, that you can instantly plug in the new variables to determine the outcome on the fly, right? And that's the purpose of analysts in this world, right? But with the great programs like I'm going to throw it in there, Zyncase, had to throw in a plug, or even Excel, you can create models where you would actually define all of the variables. The second thing, so that's you caring about you. The second thing is this. There, in this book called Getting to Yes, which I mentioned, which I think is the best negotiation book that was ever written.
Wow.
They have this thing called a BATNA. And a BATNA is a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Okay. So whenever you go into any negotiation, what you need to know is what is the other side's BATNA, which means if we walk out of the room and we don't have an agreement, what is their best alternatives, and what are all of their alternatives, and how can I affect their alternatives? Let me give you some examples. Okay. So let's say that you and I were going in and I wanted to buy your company. Right, and Mr. X here, that he had.
You can use my name. I'm sorry.
He had. Let's say that Mr. X here had 3 wonderful customers. Well, I knew that if I walk into that negotiation, and I'm not saying that I would do this because this sounds a little unscrupulous, but if I knew that I could get one of those customers away from him, then that makes his, and if he knows it too. Because a lot of times whenever you're going in, remember, competitors buy each other all the time. And a lot of times they'll have really, really frank discussions, right? And some of those discussions may be, well, if you don't come in and join our team, well, I can tell you right now that 35% of your revenue are all customers that are in the last phase of looking at a potential alternative quote from our product, which I think they're going to take. So your alternatives are bad. That sounded a little unscrupulous. Let me make it a little bit more of a rosy thing, right? So if I'm dealing in a negotiation and somebody else's alternative, like you can either settle a lawsuit and pay me $1 million, or not settle the lawsuit and pay your lawyer $3 million over the next 3 years, what's a better option, right? Now, people that are not thinking of numbers and just making emotional decisions are going to say, there is no amount of money that I'll ever pay you. I'd rather pay my lawyers $3 million than pay you $1 million, right? So that's a good example of where you can their BATNA, and that it's a better choice to settle the lawsuit, but that's where emotions then come in as a blocker. And that's one of the things that I can tell you, the older that you get, the more that you will realize that big, small, whatever, human emotions end up driving so many ultimate decisions. So you always need to take that into consideration whenever you're doing a negotiation. That was kind of a long-winded answer to
yeah, but it was comprehensive. That was dope. Okay, so we're gonna subject change a little bit. We're gonna lighten it up a little bit after that, which is what was the craziest thing you saw when you were working in the music industry? As you mentioned, Limp Bizkit.
Well, with those guys, I was just I never even had to work with or meet with them, but so So one of the funniest things was whenever we were dealing with this thing that involved Matchbox 20, so there was a guy who had claimed that he was the manager of this band called Tabitha's Secret, which is the predecessor band to Matchbox 20. And basically he had kind of gotten a hold of one of their demo tapes and sent it to this guy, Matt Serletic, and Matt ended up being my client. And Matt started Melisma Records and became the chairman of Virgin Records. And so here's a guy who's obviously pretty, with it. So he shows up to go to court in a t-shirt and jeans, typical rock star hair and all that. And I remember thinking in the back of myself, I'm like, gosh, it's good to be a rock star, right? But really the music business, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of those businesses, there's so many people that are around the actual talent that are their managers or their lawyers or their accountants. So even if you're working with one of those bands, you're not really going to be working with the band. You're going to most likely be working with their manager or their lawyer or somebody like that, because they want the artists to go off and be artists and create great art and great music and great experiences. They don't want them to be even thinking about, oh my gosh, I have a copyright infringement lawsuit because there's 3 bars of the same of our song that sounds like another song that was created 25 years ago that I've never heard of.
Yeah. Is The Art of the Deal, which is the negotiation book written by Donald Trump, have you read that book?
No.
Okay. All right. So this is a nice segue. Who did you vote for and why? If you want to share that information.
I would. So I will tell you this. I have the good fortune of working with one of the largest political strategy firms in the country. I love those guys to death. And I do not, intentionally, I don't talk politics.
Oh, 10-4. That's a great idea. Oh, so do you think it's a good, I'm going to yell. Do you think it's a good business strategy? Because I've been doing business with a few business owners who have the same idea. Do you think it's a better idea to remain politically agnostic in business?
No, I don't think that's a good idea. I choose to do it because, candidly, I can tell you that I think there's a lot of good views from a lot of good people. I think that a lot of the people that go into politics, whether they're on the right wing or the left wing, do it for the right reason. They just share different philosophical views of the world. And if you were to look at the differences in Republican or Democrat positions on a lot of things, both of them, I think, come from the right motivation. They want to create more jobs. They want to decrease taxes. They want to create better education. They want to create better outcomes. It's just a different philosophical view of how they achieve it. So I have great friends on the right and great clients on the right. I have great friends and clients on the left. And whenever they decide that they're going to get into knockdown, drag out, that's whenever I go and pour myself another beer.
All right. What is a no-no for trying to negotiate a higher salary?
I would say the biggest no-no for negotiating a higher salary is don't go in with I'm going to leave if you don't, unless you're ready to leave if they don't, right? Also, I would say the best approach to getting a higher salary is to have an open discussion about the value that you bring to the table. And if you can't describe to the person that you have to ask the question to why you bring more value to the table than what you're being compensated for, you're not ready to ask for a raise.
That's the whole statement? I don't know. It's just, okay, period. Okay, we'll take that. Which country in the world would be the best to start a company today and why?
The United States.
Why the United? So this is an international audience. There's multiple Canadians. Can we just bash Canada for a short period and say why the U.S. is better?
Well, so no, I love Canada as well. And Canada would be probably a close second, right? So one of the reasons that I think that the United States is a pretty good place to launch a business is because the laws are very well understood here. Intellectual property ownership is very clear. How you compensate people is very clear. It's generally a very fair system in terms of what the employers and the employees' responsibilities is, or what the independent contractor's responsibilities are, provided that you have a good lawyer and can get a good contract. But the United States is a pretty good environment to do that. And in some of the international work that I've done, there are a lot of barriers to entry that I've seen in other countries where you have to have a certain net capital requirement to open a company, which means that it kind of excludes people that have great ideas without a lot of capital from being able to open companies. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of employment laws that apply in different places where it's very difficult, if things aren't working out with a particular employee, to terminate them. So whenever you hire somebody, it's almost like getting married, because it's very difficult to move on if the relationship's not working out. There's also a lot of restrictions on expropriating capital. For example, if you were to open up a company and have a lot of surplus capital in China, for example, trying to get those funds out of that company into the United States may be challenging. Mm. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. It really depends on the type of industry that you're in, and and what you're trying to achieve.
Awesome. So you recommended in your introduction to negotiations about always knowing the environment that you're walking into. Lord asks, how would you recommend doing your homework on a negotiation environment?
That's a really good question. So what I do is I actually create profiles. So I create a profile of the person or organization that I'm going to be dealing with, and I list out what their motivators are, what their fears are, what they have to gain by a particular transaction. And a lot of times, they've got different paradigms that you hear people talk about. One of which is like people talking about win-win, right? I'm a big believer that if you look at the world with an open mind, because sometimes you're doing a negotiation where both people can win. And a good example of that is a business deal where you're selling your product to another company. Well, if you don't deeply believe that your product creates value for the other company, right, then you shouldn't be selling that product. So you're actually creating something whenever you're doing a high-stakes sale where you're doing something where by using your product or your service, you know that the other company is going to win and they're going to be better off because of it. A lot of times people look at the world in terms of what you'll call a zero-sum game. So a zero-sum game is the way that you would look at some litigation scenarios where, for example, if I am suing you, right, and I'm asking for money out of your pocket, and whatever money you pay me is money you won't have anymore, and there's no value that's going to be derived from that, that would be a good example of a zero-sum game. So in that situation, the way that I would try and explain it to the other side, because I think that even in the most hostile negotiation, you have to recognize that the people on the other side are people, right? Even if you're dealing with $1 billion company, you're still dealing with people, right? And they have motivations and they have fears. And so you really need to do your homework to understand who are you dealing with, what do they want to do? Because like in the example of settling a lawsuit, it could be that they just don't want to deal with this anymore, that it's taking up too much of their time, that they could be focusing their time and effort and resources creating great value by creating new products, creating new business transactions, creating new relationships. And every minute that they're spending on this, lawsuit is time that they could be spending elsewhere, or also the overall cost. I believe that you can pretty much put everything that you are looking at into quantitative terms, and that involves, looking at the cost of continuing it and what the options are. And also, I think that you always have to, as you're looking at different scenarios, you should assign risk, assign a variable for the percentage chance of the outcomes.
Okay.
So if you were to say, you know what I mean? So as you're negotiating, those are the things that you would talk about in terms of why it's in someone else's best interest to do something. And also, I believe that people will only make decisions whenever it comes to high stakes to do something or not do something if ultimately they conclude, taking everything into consideration, that it is in their best interest. So it's your job as the negotiator to be able to, number one, listen to what they have to say. Listen to the information, listen to the motivators, listen to their body language, right? And then take that and then be able to explain back to them and help them to understand why whatever the particular decision is ultimately in their best interest, which is the decision that you want them to make.
That's awesome. Let's take it down from theory and let's take it to real application, because most of the chat or most of the people on this call will be negotiating buying a car at some point. What would be your approach to walking into a car dealership and getting the best deal that you can?
So the first thing is you need to know as much as possible about that car dealership, how car dealerships work, what day of the month is best to go in there,
right,
or what day of the quarter. If you understand the way that car dealerships work, if you're going into like Ford to buy a Ford automobile, you need to know when the rebate period ends, because for a lot of car dealerships, they make a lot of their money through what's called rebate programs, where the more cars they sell, the bigger their rebates per car. And that's always judged in hindsight. So if you can go in there and you know that it's like the end of a month where they might have inventory quotas that they need to do, and you know that they're going to be more motivated because they just want to make the sale for a reason other than the profit on the car. Right? So I would say it always goes back to the same thing, right? All these questions are always going to go back to the same answer. You know, I like to give canned answers, and that is do your homework.
Awesome.
Before you go in that car dealership, you need to go in with a printed out, thing that shows that you know the real wholesale price, that shows that you know the rebate programs, that shows that you know the timing. And if you go in with information, then you're going to be a lot better off.
All right. Well, let's transition back into business. Valenci asks, how can I make my workers work efficiently and incentivize them to work without being bossy?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think that the best way to have people work in an inspired manner is to focus on helping the people the team that you're leading, make sure that they're not working on tasks. Make sure that they're working on problems. And that's a big difference, okay? Working on a task is being told to do something very specific and just doing whatever the specific thing is that you're asked to do. Working on a problem is sharing with your team the problem that you're trying to solve and spending a lot of time looking at the problem from as deep of a perspective as you can possibly do. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're in sales and you want to get your sales team to meet a particular, goal, well, start off with saying, okay, this is our goal. Let's dive into the problem here, right? So the problem is, how do we go from 0 sales this month to 50 users this month? What do we need to do, right? And focus on not telling people, if you can, as a manager, say, I'm going to commit to not telling anybody anything, but only asking questions. I think you're going to find that you have a much, much more motivated team. So I would say stay away from telling people what to do. Instead, make sure that everybody agrees on what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and then ask people to be creative and driven and come up with a solution to the problem.
Right. Awesome. In high stakes negotiation, do you leave family members behind, or do you try and juggle both the outcome of the deal or like your own personal values?
Well, I think everybody in their careers are going to have situations where they're going to have to make choices based upon their personal values. And I will say this, I think that values are things that should be immutable, right? So don't lie, don't cheat, don't do harm, like you can, those are things that you should genuinely feel and you should stand by them, right? So if you find you're in a lot of situations where you have a conflict with things that others are asking you to do or choices that you're being asked to make and your own personal values, that's a much, much deeper thing, because I think that you should always stick with your values and the values that you believe are good values, with the caveat being that everybody deals with situations where, you know, do I turn in my boss to his boss because I saw that he fudged an expense report, you know, like things like that. You know, those are things that you just have to deal with on a case-by-case basis. But I would say, hopefully, you can reconcile the differences between your moral values and your negotiation, you know, more times than not.
Awesome. Yeah, so I have a little anecdote about that working with TJ. So TJ is probably the person I've spent the most time with from the, quote unquote upper echelons of society. And there were multiple times during my tenure at ZenCase where I'd say, TJ, to be honest with you, I think your biggest weakness is that you see the best in people, which is a strength, but it's also your biggest weakness. And so I've seen multiple snakes in your midst. And as a result of seeing them like go away, like there were multiple times where you had the opportunity to like really twist the knife in those guys. And actually, there were a few times where I actually presented them to you. And you never took the bait. You've always been a person who I've always admired in terms of character. And you've taught me that no matter how successful you get, you can still be a man of character and integrity, and that's what you are. And
Thank you.
And that has taught me that it's okay to be that in the upper echelons, and you don't have to sacrifice your values, and you might be leaving money on the table. So I'm just saying that as an anecdote. I'm not TJ. I'm not in TJ's shoes, but being able to watch him at a fairly intimate level, like he actually practices that, and I admire that about you, TJ.
Thank you.
Is it good to hire your friends? Valency with another great question.
Yeah, I'll say, yeah, and I will also say, I've had the good fortune to work with people who have built some really awesome companies, and I'm thinking about it. Just about in every one of those companies, your friends are the people that you trust. Your friends are the ones that have your back, and it just if you find that your friends also happen to have the skill set that you need for a particular job or role, I think it's great. The irony is that as I think through a lot of the people that I know that have been very, very successful in life, I can tell you that in many, maybe even a majority of the time, the people that got the companies off the ground, or that were some of the first hires and some of the trusted people along the way, are absolutely were great friends.
How do you control conversation in your favor if a business pitch is not working out?
That's a good question. Sometimes business pitches fall flat. I mean, goodness knows I've done enough business pitches where, and you sometimes just can tell that they fall flat.
Right.
I would say there is I'm in technology, product development is where I spend most of my time. And I will say that I have had more pitches that have fallen flat than have gone phenomenal. One of the things that I believe is in every single pitch that you do, you should keep a structured log. And you should have in there, what were the objections that I heard? How did I respond? And, and what went right and what went wrong? And as you keep these logs, what you'll find is that every single pitch that you do, especially the ones that don't go well, those give you the best opportunities for learning, so that you can make your pitches better, so that you can make your product better, right? And so that you can, so that you can get better at sales and also get better at product development. Sometimes it may be that maybe you created a product that needs to be improved, and someone's reaction to it, which may be negative, is really what they're doing is they're helping you to guide your product development path. So listen to what the feedback is, good or bad. Bad feedback is much better than good feedback.
Right. To what extent does someone's background in terms of education affect your view of them? Like, for example, if somebody went to a crappy university, does that make you think less of them? Or alternatively, if they went to a great university, does that make you think highly of them?
Well, I think that where you go to school really matters for your first job. And then after that, it's up to you to prove yourself. So there's a lot of people that that I know that I have great respect for, some of which didn't even graduate from college, you know, and so I would say the educational part, it does show a personality attribute. Like if somebody, comes in and has that they went to, Princeton and Harvard Law School, I know that they're smart. I know that they're probably hardworking, if I see, so I really look at the educational more. But then after your first job or two, if I see that somebody dropped out of high school, but then they went on to be the #1 salesperson in their company, and then they left that company and went to another company and was the #1 salesperson, well, that's going to tell me that person's great at selling, right? And I'm not going to think twice about their educational background.
How or what do you think is the best way to build trust with people who you're negotiating or partnering with?
Well, the first thing is, the core values, right? So building trust a lot of it has to do with honesty, transparency. I mean, you've heard me give this talk a million times. Yeah. Whenever it comes to managing a company, I always say there's 3 core values: honesty, transparency, and accountability. Right. And so with those 3 key attributes, that's going to be what I look for in somebody. And how do you build that? How do you build trust? Well, the irony is that if you were to look at the science of trust, people trust people. They've got this concept called neurolinguistic programming. And so that is basically being able to see somebody and matching their reactions and gestures and body language, because then people are more likely to trust somebody if they're reacting and moving the same way. And so I know that there's different tools that you can use to get better at building trust quickly. I've never been any good at any of those things, so I just stick with the good old-fashioned. People would much rather you be direct and honest than sugarcoat something or be circuitous in how you're telling somebody something that you really feel.
I just want to pause. This is a good answer. Thank you. Have you noticed a major cultural difference in regards to negotiating with people overseas? And if so, how did you adjust?
I will say absolutely. You have to know the culture in which you're negotiating, right? And so there's some cultures that really don't respect written contracts very much. You need to know that going in, because I know in some of the dealings that I've had in certain foreign countries, I know that the written contract that we have is only going to be a starting point for a subsequent negotiation. There's also certain cultures where it is expected to barter on everything. And that may include your fees for legal services. That may include the price of a product or a service that's being delivered. But don't be offended if somebody starts to barter with you, if that is part of their customary practice. And also, that's another thing. You need to know the customs whenever you go to different places and whenever you negotiate with different people. I know the first time that I ever went on a trip to Asia, it was 3 days before we ever even started to talk business.
Wow.
We went and it was a lot of fun. We went to karaoke bars, we played golf, but it was, you really had to build the relationship first before you ever even earned the right to talk about business. And that's something that whenever I did read a book on how to do business in this particular country going over there, and so it was something that they said was pretty much a norm. But know that experience may be 180 degrees different if you were then to go and try and close a business transaction in Turkey or the Middle East or some other place like that.
Right. So there are multiple members in the Calliopean Club that are in the United Kingdom and also Australia. I want you to, because you mentioned the United States is the best place to start a business. What do you think specifically about the United Kingdom for starting a business?
I think a lot of it is you would, wherever you're located. Like if you're located in the UK, trying to start a business in the US is going to be cost prohibitive depending upon the scale of your business. So if you're in the UK, you start the business in the UK. If you're in Australia, you start the business in Australia. Right? Because you don't want to pay what I will call administrative cost. Cost of foreign compliance, cost of translation of documents, cost of lawyers and professionals. So I would say the best place to start a business is where you are located.
Awesome. Would you say that women are generally more tough than men in negotiation?
I've never really thought of that. What's interesting is I have found that the women that I've dealt with professionally have a much more keen sense of emotional awareness than a lot of the men. And what I mean by that is they have, as I think through some of the women that I've dealt with, they have had a very good ability to be direct when being direct is the right thing to do, to be more eloquent whenever that's what's appropriate. And so and also I think that if you look at, nowadays, I think that if you look at who's in law school, who's in business school, a majority of it's, I know in law school now it's a majority women. So, so I think that a lot of the old, social paradigms have gone out the window.
What is the best way to handle an objection during either a sale or a negotiation?
Well, the best way to always handle an objection is to make sure you understand the objection first and foremost, right? Yeah. So if somebody's making an objection, then that's a great opportunity for you to understand the objection, to learn about the objection, to learn about the problem that somebody's trying to solve, to learn about why they may have said the objection. If you just handle an objection and all that you do is ask really insightful questions to understand more about the objection, then I think that that'll be something that would be appreciated by the other side. And the other thing is this: sometimes objections are things that you don't know the answer to right then and there. One of the best ways to gain credibility and also gain a second bite at the apple is to take in as much information as you appropriately can about the objection and then leave the door open to give a follow-up that would be specifically tailored to that particular objection.
Got you. So we've been talking about negotiation and whether it's not high stakes or not. Mars Bars has an interesting question. How do you actually practice negotiation? Is there a way to practice it? Can you practice this?
Absolutely. And the way that I think you need to do it is I would say start off by reading books on negotiation, right? There's a series of books. Okay, so let's talk about two different elements of negotiation. One element of negotiation is the technical aspect, the concept of the BATNA, right? So that book, Getting to Yes, read that book. The second thing is the emotional element, okay? So the emotional element, there's a book called Crucial Conversations, which is an excellent book to help you learn how to de-escalate very hostile situations, right? And then after you've read the book Crucial Conversations, the next book to read is a book called Crucial Confrontations.
Oh.
Okay? So that's a book that teaches you the methodology to be able to have a very difficult, direct conversation with somebody that they do not want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that a good way to practice it is read, right? And then as you're reading it, apply those things in your day-to-day practice. For example, just think about it, right? The BATNA, right? The best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Think about how that applies in every little area of your life, where you go to dinner, right?
Right.
What like, and think of it in that terms. And then also, the book, Crucial Conversations and Crucial Confrontations, those books really deal more with what I'll call emotional maturity, right? And a common trait of leaders that I've seen is, even in the most hostile, very difficult, challenging situation, the leaders that I really look up to are the ones that keep their cool, and they will, practice the techniques that a lot of them are very simple, right? Like what Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Right.
Right. So if you're looking at ways to practice, you start by putting on your reading glasses. At least that's what old people like me do, and read. The second thing is you apply the principles that you're going to learn and then I'd say if you read those 3 books, okay, that will give you an excellent paradigm to then apply in a number of different situations.
Awesome. So I want to ask you one more question, then I kind of want to see if you want to keep, well, because we're at the hour mark. We budgeted an hour and a half, but that accounted for setting up. Like, how are you feeling?
Oh, I know, I'm good. I mean, I told my wife that you were going to be coming by the office today, so she gave me a hall pass.
No, all right. I don't know what, that could be taken any kind of way, but I'll take it. Let's jump into the next question, which is, as a technologist and entrepreneur, how can I best go about seeking out partnerships to build companies with investors or other entrepreneurial groups?
That's a really, really great question, because, like, I will tell you right now that the thing that has allowed me the opportunities that I've had in life is the fact that I was very lucky in that I knew, really, because of growing up and knowing some of these people, like the old chief financial officer of Barnett Bank, which is now Bank of America. His son was in my class in high school, and I knew him very well. And so whenever I needed to find investors for this first transaction that I ever did, where I took off my legal hat and put on my business hat, ironically, his dad, I already knew him, right? And so, personal relationships are one thing. But also what I would say is this: there's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful community of angel investors and technology entrepreneurs in just about every city. And so, like in where I live in Jacksonville, Florida, we have groups here that have been formed that are incubators, that are angel investment funds. There's virtual groups that have been formed. You've always got Y Combinator that's out on the West Coast, based near San Francisco, which has phenomenal wealth of very, very, very talented technology entrepreneurs and investors. So I would say, more than anything else, look to collaborate with those people that share the same common interests that you have in whatever the technology solution is.
Awesome. Eris asks, what's an instant red flag on someone's resume?
That they've been to jail.
Okay, but who puts that on a resume, though?
No, red flags that I would say on a resume are people that spend very, very short periods of time at a lot of companies. So understand that whenever you are young, you are building a history that will show up on your resume, right? So if I see somebody is in a lot of jobs for under a year, that's going to tell me something about them. Because I can also tell you that when you have people that you work with that you trust and that you like Josh, I mean, I can tell you, Josh and I have had many a conversation where I was focused on, Josh, tell me what I need to do to make this job better for you, because you don't want to lose good people. And if somebody's bouncing around a lot, it tells you that either, they just were unlucky one too many times, which maybe they can explain that. But more than not, it probably tells you that they're either not as good as what they're promoting that they are, or that there's some other issue there.
So, guys, let's downvote Gloose asks, in regards to the U.S.-China trade war, has that affected your business or your clients in any way?
I mean, yeah, it's affected the overall economy in the United States. As my business goes, I guess one of the ways that you could characterize what's good for lawyers, change is good for lawyers, right? So things are going great. It's good for lawyers because people are buying things, they're making capital expenditures, they need lawyers for that, and then things go terrible. Well, then they need lawyers to protect them from the lawsuits that are coming, from from dealing with downsizing, from dealing with adjusting their balance sheet. So change is good for lawyers. In terms of the U.S.-China trade war, um, I think that it has, that combined with COVID have caused a very interesting scenario where there's a lot of shortages of a lot of different things. And the thing that as I look at it from my client's perspective, a lot of my clients deal with many suppliers, and if they can't get a key part that maybe was made in China for some reason, that hurts their business. And so there's downstream effects of the trade war as it relates to companies in the United States completing their products, and that I think unfortunately were unintended, but that ultimately end up hurting the business in the United States.
Wow. Okay. So you think the U.S.-China trade war has hurt the United States economy generally?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I would say that it's a much more complicated question.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
You have to look at sectors, right? And there's many sectors that, for example, pharmaceutical products. Like, what a lot of people don't realize is that the materials that go into the pharmaceuticals that they claim are made in the United States are actually materials that are made in Asia, in China. So there's always so one of the things that I would say is an important point from the U.S.-China trade war is that you always have to appreciate the complexity of the situation that you're in, and there's some outcomes of that have been good. There's some outcomes that have been bad. So that's something that you have to take into consideration.
10-4. So we have to talk about COVID-19. I'm so glad that the same guy or gal asked this question in regards to COVID-19. What do you expect to see in the short and long-term future?
Well, I think that the first thing that you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of people that are a lot more comfortable working remotely and working in locations that are more comfortable for them. And also, I think that the biggest thing that's come out of COVID-19 is actually something that's very good, and that is an acceleration of using technology in the workplace to allow people more personal freedom.
Awesome. What would you do if you're worried that your salary is too high and that you've become, this is a problem that my dad ran into, your salary is too high and that you might be too expensive for the company that you work at?
I would say you need to be honest with your company and with what your long-term goals are. So if you want to stay with the company and you'd be willing to take a concession in your compensation to stay there, that's something that you should be direct with your company about. Because sometimes, there's union contracts, there's lockstep programs, there's sometimes arrangements that are very much external to your situation, and it could be something that drives you out. Like, there's a lot of union contracts where certain people may be too expensive, but they can't agree to a separate rate because there's a collective bargaining agreement in place. So, but I think that the first rule, and this is the first rule that I apply to a lot of things, is be honest with yourself, be honest with those people that you're dealing with.
So a follow-up to that question from Eris again is, she's responding to you, how do you know that they wouldn't take advantage of taking a concession in your pay?
Taking an advantage of is a negative connotation.
Okay.
But I would say that the taking advantage of is a optic. It's a view, right? So if you knew that if you didn't agree to a concession, that they were going to downsize you so that they could get a more appropriately priced resource, then it's not necessarily taking advantage of you. if you offer to take a less amount and pay, and they accepted it, if it helps you meet your objective and helps them meet their objective. Now, I will also say that I also very much fundamentally agree that, you know, people that look at the world in terms of I'm going to get more by taking from others at their detriment are people that I have not found to be very successful. The people that I've found to be very successful are the ones that genuinely look to meet fairness as the right standard. Fairness is not overly one-sided on one side or the other. Fairness is something where it is, in theory, going to be, you know, equally fair to you and equally fair to me. So I think it's important to always talk about things that you do and transactions that you have and things like that in terms of fairness.
Awesome. How does one find an investor to fund a technological idea?
Well, that's a great question. So the first thing is, you know, your network, right? And if you don't have a network of people that just happen to have tons of money hanging out of their pockets that are looking for crazy investments to make, I would say there's a lot of great websites out there now, like WeFunder and Crowdsource. There's a lot of crowdsourced websites out there that if you have a great idea, you know, go and reach out to those sources. Also, reach out to the angel investment networks. Go to the Chamber of Commerce of the city that you're in and ask them, where do technology, you know, young tech technology entrepreneurs go to find investors? And as you start to go out there and look around the world, one of the things you're going to find is that the world has gotten much smaller. So now somebody that might be in, you know, Australia, for example, may see a business in Jacksonville, Florida that they're particularly attracted to and that they want to make an investment in.
Awesome. What is the best way to get a good reference as a college graduate?
Go to people that know and like you the best.
Right. I mean, that's a great answer. It's how would you set limits in regards to, this is a really good question. How would you set limits in regards to a manager asking something that you think is a little bit too much?
Oh, you know what? That is a great question, because learning how to say, if I would say that, forget about negotiating. The one thing that will help people be more successful in life than anything else is learning the art of how to say no, right? You know, so I think it was actually Warren Buffett said this, like the most valuable skill that anybody can learn is the skill of how to say no to people. So, you know, a lot of it depends on the circumstances, but, you know, I think that it's okay to say no to people. And I think that you gain respect by saying no to people. But, you know, I would much rather have somebody say no to me than to say yes and then let me down.
Right. How does one calculate the growth potential of their startup idea or their company?
With a calculator.
Good. Okay.
No,
all right.
I mean, how do you count? You know, nobody. So just so you know, I mean, whenever you start a company, nobody knows if it's going to become the next Uber or the next Facebook or the next Microsoft.
Right.
Right. They're starting a company based upon their ideas. And whenever you bring in investors, you have to structure the investment so that it makes sense for the investor and it makes sense for the entrepreneur. And we are living in a time where, fortunately, you can raise capital in a number of different types of ways. Like, you know, the new hot craze is this thing called a SAFE, which is a simple agreement for future equity, right?
Okay.
And a SAFE agreement is, give me the money now. It's treated like equity, but if I do something special with this company, this is how it converts from something that is not really equity into direct equity in the company.
That's awesome. Would you say that you can transpose these professional negotiation skills into your personal life?
I think that they're the same skill set. Absolutely. Read Crucial Conversations.
Is it okay to be in debt?
It better be. For me. Well, yeah, of course. So I always look at the world in a very traditionalist view. And whenever I say that, I mean, I look at a balance sheet. And if you are if you look on your balance sheet and you have bought assets, okay? Assets can mean a college education. Assets can mean a Zen case, a technology startup company, right? Assets can mean, like you can incur debt to buy assets. What you don't want to ever do is to incur debt to fund losses. Some businesses just need to die, right? So I know that this may not be the question that they were asking, but I'm going to explain it to them in this way. If you are adding assets to your personal balance sheet by incurring debt, then that's the debt that you incur. But if you're incurring debt because you're just you're living a little bit too big for your britches, that's not good debt. So think of debt. Debt is okay to buy assets, not to fund losses.
Mm-hmm. Are angels investors or bank loans better? Like, which one is better?
Well, you're talking to a traditionalist, so I'm going to say equity is always better than debt. It is much better, but there's a balance, right? So you have to look at why you need the money. So I'm going to change the question around a little bit and say, to build the fundamentals of a business, use equity. To fund liquidity, because you need to buy more inventory that you're going to sell, or something, which is temporary, basically to take an unliquid asset like accounts receivable and make them liquid, use debt.
Awesome. So I kind of want to wind down because we're a little bit over an hour now. Do you have what's your most interesting story in regards to a negotiation?
Wow. I have to think about that one a little bit. So this kind of, I'll leave it with a funny story. So there was once a matter that I was involved with, and both of the parties were very sophisticated, and they could not get beyond this gap that they had, where each of them thought that they were equally right. But they're both big boys, and big boy entrepreneurs also are not afraid to take risks. So then they agreed, we're going to flip a coin.
No way.
Now, this is what's interesting. So for their coin flipping, there was probably 30 minutes worth of discussion about what was heads, what was tails, does it land in your hand, do you then flip it onto, or does it just fall on the ground, and all this other stuff. And, ultimately, this is actually kind of a funny situation. Ultimately, they talked through all these rules, and it was like really technical things like, well, what happens if it rolls off, and blah, blah, blah. Well, whose coin should we use? Well, they flipped a coin. There was a winner, there was a loser, but they were close enough because they were talking about a one point that they just couldn't get over, but they chose to say, let's let the laws of chance determine the outcome.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, I think that after they did that, they were probably sworn enemies as they were walking into that room. Funny thing is, they ended up becoming pretty close friends.
Wow.
And it's because I think they had a mutual respect for one another, because they realized that, wait a second, this guy's my enemy because maybe we're so much alike.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you, TJ. This was wonderful. I hope the answers were satisfactory to the Calliopean Club. I really appreciate the mods of this server putting us on. The Get Money Club has just started, and I wanted to kick it off with a bang. Thank you, TJ, for
Thank you for having me.